hold hands and close your eyes. It's midnight, and you're listening to the Ghost Story Guys. Welcome to the Ghost Story Guys. I'm Brennan Storr.
I'm Paul Bestall.
And this is a show where we talk about spooks, specters, and all the other things watching us from the shadows beyond the campfire. Some conversations only make sense after the sun has set, and this is most definitely one. Thanks for tuning in. This is episode number 193, he said with a question mark at the end. Yes, 193. And we're coming to you from that tiny mountain cabin you dream about, but can never quite reach. Paul, as we approach 200, reality is just kind of crumbling around me, so I have no idea what day it is or what episode it is. I'm just happy to be here.
And I am too.
Excellent.
Too. Happy.
A couple happy guys here to talk about the haunting of Utah.
Ooh.
On this episode.
Without mentioning the S word.
Without mentioning the S word. The S word, of course, being Sister Sledge.
Sacramento. They don't like Sacramento in Utah.
Who does? I don't know that the people in Sacramento like Sacramento, based on what I've heard, Paul. So yes, on this episode, in this very, very strange opening, we are going to be talking about high strangeness in Utah. And this is a preview because on the next Talk Spooky, we are going to be having a conversation with John Olson, author of the Stranger Bridgerland series. And his latest book is also about Utah. So we thought we would get a jump, give you fine folks a peek into the weirdness that is the Beehive State, and then follow it up with a conversation with someone who really knows the terrain.
Absolutely. Lovely man, John.
I'm really looking forward to that chat. I really quite like the book. I've read, I think, about half of the Northern Utah book so far. And we actually have a story from that book in this episode as well.
Yeah. Smashing guy. Really nice. He's collected some incredible stories over the years.
Well, before we dive into high strangeness in Utah, Paul, how you been?
All right.
You need to talk about a big guy?
No, I'm all right. You get used to it because, it's one of those things. When you don't get to a final of football competitions for 55 years, Brennan, you kind of think it's never going to happen, ever. And you just, disappointment year after year, tournament after tournament, breaks you down, makes you angry. But 3 years we've got to 2 finals, which is something I never thought we'd ever achieve, ever. And to lose one on penalties and then to lose one to the first team ever to win every game in a tournament is annoying, but fair play to the best team that won on the day. And you've got to be in it. I think losing is one of those things that makes you appreciate winning things more. And I've always been a big believer in being a magnanimous and gracious winner, but being a bad loser in the sense of not kicking off about losing or whatever, but using that feeling of disappointment and failure as a catalyst to push you on so you never experience that feeling again. And what better place to win it than in America in their centenary? Is it their yeah, it'll be their 250th anniversary of independence. What would be better than England landing on the shores of the New World to reconquer the continent?
I simply hope there is still a new world for you to land on the shores of.
Well, we're hopeful. I mean, to be fair, a bunch of English football fans turning up in 2 years' time might be the relief everybody needs. Bring America back to in regards to their hatred towards their English.
There we go. Give them a common enemy, a new common enemy.
We'll bring America back together again. We'll heal them and take the trophy home. So
we got to take something in exchange for all this magnanimity.
Absolutely. Be nice to be drawn with Canada, I think, if we get there.
Well, hopefully we can at least top that.
Hey, you're all right. You took the world champions in the semi-final. You did really well. You finished joint third best in the Americas football tournament. That's an incredible achievement for Canada without the footballing tradition that it has. So you've clearly come on leaps and bounds in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I won't pretend to know what has changed and why that has happened, but I think it's pretty cool nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm not sure either, to be honest, because we get Canadian football shown over here randomly, and often I'm just like, what is going on here? This seems to be some children's sports arena that they're using, and why are there marching bands before every game?
I tell you, Paul, I don't know what it is, but here in North America, we love us a marching band. I don't understand. We used to have some friends who lived in an apartment that had quite a high balcony that was over top of the Canada Day parade route. And for years, we would watch the Canada Day parade. But over time, we all kind of thought, why the fuck are we doing this? This is 113 minutes of marching bands from all over North America. And then you get a couple really tired people in mascot costumes. I don't understand the appeal whatsoever of marching bands. I know it's a big thing. There's I think in Utah, actually, funny enough, I think in Salt Lake City, there at least used to be a marching band competition, a high school marching band competition. I actually wrote a story about that for the other show. But yeah, I don't get it. Folks, if you understand the appeal of marching bands, let us know. ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. And on this episode, we will be exploring not only the mystery of what it is that appeals to North Americans about marching bands, but all the other high strangeness in the Beehive State as well. Before we do that, though, we got to thank our patrons.
This one's for the patrons.
Patrons, we could not do what we do without you. So thank you. Thank you, thank you. For real, guys, every single person who downloads the Ghost Story Guys, you help make us who we are. But without our patrons, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube subscribers, we truly could not make any of this work. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And while we'd like to thank all our patrons, we would especially, right now, like to thank our latest patrons. They are
Christine Lily Kessler,
John Roberts,
Scrapbot 13.
Guys, again, thank you so much. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it. Ads are not a reliable source of income. We make a little bit from ads, but really, we're able to do this consistently because of our paid subscribers. So again, thank you so much. And if you'd like to join the team, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. That's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys. Or you can also sign up via Ghost Story Guys Premium on Apple Podcasts and YouTube. And if you do sign up on Apple Podcasts and you want a shout out in this segment, we would love to do that for you. Send us your confirmation. Forward it to ghoststoryguys@gmail.com, ghoststoryguys@gmail.com, and we will make sure to thank you here because we appreciate every single one of you. And again, none of this happens without your support. One last time, that's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, patreon.com/ghoststoryguys, or sign up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts or YouTube to get ad-free episodes and a whole lot more. One last thing, shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Harper Smith. You can find more of Harper's work at rainydaysforghosts.bandcamp.com or by searching for Rainy Days for Ghosts wherever you get your tunes. All right, Paul, we are almost there. We're going to take a quick break and then dive into the stories that keep Utah weird.
Visions of the Apocalypse from Stranger Utah. When this happened to me, I was living in Denver, where I'd just graduated from college. I'd been on a search for work all over the western US, but I seemed to be getting nowhere. I was frustrated because I was interviewing in lots of places and just not getting any of the jobs. I had an initial phone interview with a company in Salt Lake City, but I wasn't really sure if I wanted to live there. Honestly though, I would have taken anything at the time just to get started. I was appreciative that they were going to fly me out there, so I figured I'd accept the interview. I flew in on Monday night, and my meeting was the following day at 1 p.m. When I arrived, I texted my contact, and he told me I needed to find my own lodging for the night. This took me by surprise because they hadn't told me they weren't providing a place for me to stay until I was already there. I didn't have much money, so it was a bit irritating, and that didn't really give me a great first impression. It seemed like a weird practice. When I told him it was strange, he mentioned that this was how the company had always done things. After searching for a while, knowing my funds were limited, I got a taxi to a small affordable place in downtown Salt Lake City. It's one where you walk to the front reception area, but then all the rooms are accessed from outside the building. It was on Temple Street, and all the rooms faced outwards towards the parking lot. Across the way, I could see a much bigger and nicer hotel. I checked in and made my way to my room. It was clean, but very outdated. I showered and got cleaned up. I was getting hungry, but by that time it was dark, and I'd yet to determine if I was in the good or bad part of town. This was my first trip to Salt Lake, so I didn't really want to venture out. Luckily, I found a vending machine, grabbed some chips, and returned to my room. I remember stopping and looking over the parking lot and buildings. It may have been that I was alone in a new city, or that I was creeped out by this cheap hotel, but something felt off. It was September and warm out, but there was a hint of fall bite to the wind, and I watched TV until about 11 p.m. and then went to bed. But I had a horrible night's sleep. I kept dreaming of gunfire and screaming, and when I'd wake up, it would mostly be quiet. This surprised me because most cheap hotels tend to be noisy. This happened at both 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. But luckily I was able to eventually fall back asleep each time I woke up. And I remember waking up from the light outside shining in through the large window near the door. I was sure I'd closed the curtains, but they were wide open. As I cleared my head and looked around, I saw the room was dirty and shambles. I climbed out of bed and looked around. How had I not noticed how run-down and filthy the room was last night? Just then I was hit by the pungent smell of burning plastic and garbage. Confused, I walked over to the window. It was so dirty, so I couldn't see much except a thick smoke. I reached over and pulled the door open, and the door was harder to move than I remember, like the hinges were dirty or rusty or something. By this time I was horribly confused. I stepped out of my room and noticed there was dirt and garbage all over the landing. I looked up and took in my surroundings. Across the way, the big hotel had extensive burn damage and was still smouldering a little. The right side of the building had fallen out, and I could see the inside of these hotel rooms with the beds hanging out, with charred carpet and walls. The air was so thick with smoke and ash that I could hardly breathe. The parking lot that had been about half full last night was all but empty except for a few burnt-out cars and litter spread all over. I tried to look down the street, but all I could see was overturned cars and ash blowing down the street. I was in shock and kept repeating myself. What happened? What happened? What happened? I quickly remembered I was only in my boxers and all my stuff was inside. I turned and pushed the stiff door with my shoulder and hip and stepped back inside. As I crossed through the door, my vision blurred for just a moment, and I got very dizzy. I fell forward, reaching towards the bed. I knew it wasn't too far away and hoped it would break my fall, but I hit the bed and fell off to the side. I remember thinking that smoke from the plastic must have made me feel dizzy. The next thing I remember was looking up at the ceiling from the floor. I got up slowly and sat on the bed, wondering how long I'd been out. As my vision cleared, I looked around the room and realised it was clean again. It was just like I had remembered from the night before. I jumped up and walked to the window, and this time the curtain was now closed. I pulled the drapes over to the side and saw the parking lot now half full again, and there were no burnt-out vehicles. I opened the door with ease and I stepped out onto the landing. Everything was back to normal. The building on the other side was standing with all its walls intact, cars were driving up and down the street, and nothing was out of place. And then suddenly I was hit by the smell of smoke. Fearing the worst, I instinctively jumped back. I turned towards the smell, and standing 2 doors down was a man leaning over the rail, smoking. I'm sure I had an interesting expression on my face because he gave me a weird look, flicked his cigarette off the balcony, and went back to his room. I walked back to my room and sat down on the bed. I'd no idea what had just happened. I'm a rational person. I believe in things I can see and touch. I started to convince myself I'd had a dream and fallen out of bed. It was the only rational explanation. I got up and walked over to the bathroom to splash some water on my face. I turned on the tap, and as I stuck my hands in the running water, that's when I realised that my hands were now covered in black soot. My memory flashed back to my recent experience. The room's door had been covered in soot when I tried to get back in. I saw on my shoulder and my boxers both had a line of dirt and ash on them as well. I remember having to force the door back open. I began to freak out as this realisation hit me. I hadn't imagined or dreamed it. It was all too much for my mind to wrap around, and I got sick to my stomach. There was too much physical evidence pointing to what had happened for it to have been just my imagination. I got dressed and sat on the bed for a long time. I knew what I saw, and I knew it wasn't a dream. I went to my interview knowing full well that I wasn't going to take the job. There was no way I could stay in that city again for any length of time. I finally found another job and moved on. It's been 6 years now, and I still remember what it looked like when I opened that motel door. I'm not sure what I did or what exactly happened to me. Was it a vision of the future? A glimpse into another reality? I have no idea, but I know without doubt it physically happened to me.
That comes from John Olson's Stranger Utah, which I encourage you to pick up. I bought a copy on Kindle. It's only a couple bucks. And there's some really interesting stories in there from the state of Utah. And we're going to be talking to John on the next episode of Talk Spooky. So we're going to have lots more Utah chat with John. And again, it's a short read, only a couple bucks, and there's some really interesting stuff in there. What do you think of that one, Paul?
It's very odd, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm always kind of fascinated by apocalyptic stuff. I think because that has always been a fear of mine. And honestly, I think it actually comes from 9/11, because I remember having my first really apocalyptic dreams after 9/11 happened.
I had one this morning.
Really? Would you mind talking about it?
No, it was quite strange, actually. See, this is the thing. I can remember dreams now, can't I? So, yes, I remember I was sat somewhere like Greece or somewhere at a cafe by the beach. Beautiful day. And we're looking out over the sea. And then all of a sudden I saw these eruptions in the water, like it was boiling.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, what's going on? What's going on? And then all of a sudden the water started to go away. And as soon as it started to go, I just jumped up and I just went, tsunami, tsunami, right? And I set off running down the road, and all the water's disappearing. All these people are going, run, run. And then I realized I'd run and I'd left something, and I started to run back. And as I was running back, I could see at the edge of the horizon that there was now this giant wall of water.
Oh, man.
And I turned round and I thought, right, and I got my phone and I thought, right, and I just set off running, and then I woke up.
Oof.
But yeah, it was like the sea. It was like when Godzilla comes out of the ocean. It was just bubbling, unlike what happens in a tsunami, because in the tsunami it just disappears and then comes back with a vengeance. But yeah, it was very weird, strange. I was trying to think. I wasn't thinking I was watching a documentary about the discovery of Machu Picchu last night, so it wasn't really linked to my television viewing before I went to bed.
They don't seem to have necessarily like a one-to-one correlation, because actually, that's not true. I say that was my first, that after 9/11 was my first apocalyptic dream, but it actually wasn't. I remember now, I had one in high school. I remember I was in science class, and all of a sudden the air around us went red. And everyone started panicking, and we all got up to run out of the class. And as we run out of class, the air got redder and redder and hot. And that was it. And I've had dreams of kind of dying in extreme weather events similar to what you're describing. And I just find it fascinating. I don't think, because I think, doing what we do, I do think there are the possibilities of prophetic dreams, absolutely. But I don't think that, I think apocalyptic dreams are the ones that people obviously go like, well, that's got to be a thing that's going to happen. But I think that's just because we are so ruled by sort of the like Christian mentality in North America and Western Europe, because like apocalyptic thinking is such a part of Christianity. And Christianity is such a formative part of our cultural experience. Even if we're like, I'm not a Christian person, but obviously I was raised in the Catholic Church, and that's a big part of it. I had a friend who would have these very vivid apocalyptic dreams. He would talk about them and he would just say, man, I think it really means something, because they were so vivid. But in the end, none of them have come to pass. And I think how we envision the world ending says more about us and our fears than it does about what's actually going to happen.
It always strikes me, these kind of things, because obviously I was reading an article this week as well about a gentleman called John Barker, who set up what was called the Premonitions Bureau here.
Oh, okay. We talked about him previously on the show.
Yeah, I've just been reading another article about him the other day. And so, yeah, it's interesting, because obviously Barker created this bureau of his favourite predictors around the United Kingdom, who were sort of sharing disasters after what had happened at Aberfan in Wales in the 60s. And they got some very strange results, which obviously has the twist in the tail that one of his predictors said that he was going to die, and he did, of an aneurysm, I think it was, completely out of the blue. It was one of those things. It just wasn't supposed to happen. Then he died very suddenly and very far younger than he should have done. So it's interesting how we now, in this era, you will get this kind of thing that I don't think well, there may be corners of the internet where these things are still rife, but they don't seem to be gathered with much credit these days. Or there are so many examples of fake mediums and psychics doctoring evidence to make it look as though they're predicting something's happened, but they've actually recorded it after the event, which several have been caught out with over the years. So I'm not sure if there's anybody still out there collecting these things. And if so, because Art Bell used to do it every New Year's Eve, didn't he? He used to get all kinds of strange characters ringing him up with their predictions for the year. And the amount of times California was about to fall into the sea in the 1990s, I'm surprised there was anybody left there by the year 2000.
I remember that got so popular. Bill Hicks did the whole that whole bit centered around California sinking into the sea.
Well, technically, it's due to happen. That's the joy of tectonic plates. But, let's try not to dwell on these things, because when it happens, there's nothing anybody will be able to do.
Oh, yeah. But I think that's part of what annoys me about apocalyptic stuff is quite often, one, I think people have a hard time separating, like, their sense of self from the larger world. So I think, when they think of themselves dying, it can't just be that I'm just a guy and I'm dying. It's got to be something that's happening in a much larger context. So I'm not just afraid of me dying. Obviously, if I'm dying, everyone's dying. And actually, it reminded me, I had a friend back in high school who said this thing that I realize now is a very big red flag. And God, I hope he's not out in the world hurting anyone. But he said, when I die, the whole world should die with me. And at the time, I just thought, well, that doesn't seem right. But as a 40-year-old man looking back, if I heard a teenager saying that, I wouldn't be coming to school the next day. I'll tell you that much.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something I've always been very interested in, because obviously there was a lot of reports over here in Europe about one of the Canary Islands, Las Palmas, which is essentially splitting in half. And so scientists several years ago postulated that when it does split in half the island is just going to fall into the sea and send a mega tsunami across the Atlantic Ocean to smash into the eastern seaboard of North America. Now they're not too sure that would happen, but I've yet to see any prediction of a major tsunami predicted well in advance.
And I'm not impressed by predictions when it's a geological thing that we know is going to fucking happen at some point anyways. That's not a prediction, man. Like, there's going to be a massive earthquake. Fuck off. Of course there is. The earth is constantly in motion, you fraud piece of shit. Like, obviously, there's going to be an earthquake. There will be a great tsunami. Yep, that also happens. Like, great job. You want to really impress me? Tell me what's something that we don't expect to happen.
Tell me why there was a mega tsunami that hit Britain in the 17th centuries and killed hundreds that hardly anybody talks about. I had
never heard of this.
It flooded where Nick's from. All that area got washed.
No shit.
Yeah, it's a massive mega tsunami. Early 1600s, I think it was. Absolutely devastated the southwest of England.
Just before we move on, I think I may know why God did that. And he just messed up the timing. So when I was back in Victoria, Nick told me this story, and I don't know how she had never told me this before. When she was a kid, she grew up in the southwest of England, as you know, and she lived in a little town. And that little town had an ice cream truck. Yes. Everyone knew the ice cream truck. You'd hear the tune, and the guy put on an Italian accent. Now, she's pretty sure it probably wasn't a real Italian accent, but that was his thing. And everyone loved the ice cream man. Well, as it turns out, Paul, maybe a little too much. Because one day she was out with her family. She was a little kid, and she saw the ice cream truck parked in the back corner of a parking lot. And parked next to that ice cream truck was a car. And in that car was a couple engaged in the physical act of love, one of whom happened to be the ice cream man.
Mamma mia!
It's a spicy meatball. And
he's probably just showing her his cones.
I said, well, maybe.
Asked her if she wanted a flake in it.
Oh, I don't even want to know what that means.
Well, a flake. Here we have. Do you not have 99?
No, I know what you're referring to. I just wasn't thinking. Didn't know what the analog to that would be if we were talking in metaphor.
99 with the flake in.
I am aware. Stop doing this motion. It's upsetting. You can't. Yeah, that's the one. Yep, he's doing a thing, folks, and I think I need a safe space. But
do that with a flake, you'll break it.
Yeah, I can speak from experience there. But yeah, so I thought that was very funny because I said, well, maybe that was Mrs. Ice Cream Man, and she's like, no, I don't. Not in that parking lot in the middle of the day. In a car next to the, and I'm like, okay, no, that's fair. There may have been some ice cream adultery happening there. So this is why God punished the Southwest. Again, he just got the timing wrong.
Yeah, I've discovered as well, referring to the flooding of the Bristol Channel, as it's known, in 1607. They're not sure what caused it. It was either a mega storm surge or a tsunami, but they don't know which one it was.
I'll be damned.
Yeah, we had a massive flood here in the 1950s that nobody talks about. All the southeast, Essex, Norfolk, Suffolk, all the southeast of England was hit by a massive storm surge at 4 a.m. in winter.
Oh, Jesus.
And obviously there was a lot of post-war sort of temporary buildings down there at that time as well. It's one of them things you'll occasionally see the odd documentary every 10 years or so. It never gets talked about. It's one of the biggest natural disasters that hit Britain. And they don't talk about it for some reason. It's very odd.
Man alive. Well, folks, if you take anything away from this episode of Ghost Story, guys, 1, learn how to swim. And 2,
yes. If
you're going to commit adultery, don't do it next to your very recognizable work vehicle. House has devil. So here's the deal. My father owns a house in North Salt Lake that I've been raised in and out of since the divorce of him and my mother when I was 2 years old. The house has an old history and dates back to the early 1870s. It was an old polygamist's home and barn house that has since been renovated. The train passes twice in the night, about 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. The foundation and structure of the house is so old, the whole house shakes and rattles as a result. There's a room upstairs that I've always been scared to go in. Ironically, that happens to be my room now that I'm staying here more often. There's a room across the hall that I also sleep in, which belongs to my father. For the past year, I've been staying in there when he's not around. A little history of me. I'm a full skeptic, do not believe in God, ghosts, or spirits. But now that I've been in this room in North Salt Lake for the past year, I have felt uneasy, starting with the train waking me twice in the night. The dreams began in July 2011, but they didn't feel like dreams. I would wake up in the same position as I'd been in the dreams. Also, whatever scenery had been in the dream, such as clothes left around or lights left on, were the same as the waking world. One dream I can recall is me waking up in the room and looking over towards the bathroom and seeing 3 cats and 1 rat. I jumped out of bed and told them, leave, calmly escorting them down the stairs and out the front door. I then vividly remember getting back into bed and trying to fall back asleep. I don't know when the next part of my experience took place, but I remember being awoken by a pounding on my room door. Thinking it was the train, I turned over and felt a presence in the room. Looking back towards the door, I saw a hooded figure, its black and red face exposed by my bathroom light which I had left on. It had horns from the top of its head and a sharp-toothed grin. It then rushed over to me and hovered over me face to face. I could feel it breathing on me, and even its tongue touched my cheek. It said, Ev Setan Var, which in Turkish, I speak Turkish, means house has devil. Coming out of this experience felt much like coming out of sleep paralysis. I ran downstairs and sat up all night. My grandma and aunt have a room downstairs and heard none of this, and my father wasn't here that night. In December of that same year, my other aunt was visiting and stayed in the room. She woke at about 2 a.m. screaming in Turkish, something came. She refused to sleep in the room again. The following month, January 2012, I told my father about all these experiences. He told me that when he was 18, he lived in that room and experimented with Ouija boards and spells, ultimately trying to ruin others' success out of jealousy. And that's really interesting. I actually know a guy who, well, I know him through people. I don't know him personally. I met him once. I didn't like him. But he has this thing where he's a very petty, cruel person. He works, perhaps not surprisingly, in the entertainment industry. If he sees someone, if someone pisses him off, he will actually try and direct his hatred at them to produce negative outcomes. He genuinely believes that he can do this. And I mean, I have kind of seen obliquely from a distance some of this, work. But consequently, he himself just leads a life of perpetual misery. It's like the whole thing just feeds itself.
Yep. Clearly you needed to listen to the teachings of Yoda.
Go on.
Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to darkness, or words to that effect.
Oh, yep. Fear leads to the, there we go, to the dark side. Yeah. I mean, and this guy's pure fucking dark side.
Yeah, George Lucas should have listened to that as well. I'm only saying that because I saw a meme earlier on where somebody said, "Oh, there were a brilliant trilogy of Star Wars films. Are there any more?" And there's like silence for 2 panels, and the other one goes, "No."
Oh man, I mean, someone should have told that the entire Star Wars I shouldn't say the entire, to an alarmingly large portion of the Star Wars fandom. I spend a lot of time sort of in the entertainment movie space just reading shit, and I cannot think of a worse group of people than that particular, like the really toxic part of Star Wars fandom. What a miserable bunch of pricks.
Yes, I'm of that age as well where I'm constantly targeted by Star Wars advertisements because obviously I'm a middle-aged man and I can't think of anything less relevant to me in 2024. I've never seen any of The Mandalorian. I gave up. I watched, is it The Force Awakens, the first one of the new trilogy? And I thought it was all right, but then I thought, well, right, I've seen 8 Star Wars films at this point. No, I'd seen 7 because I've seen the original 3, 2 of the prequels. I've never watched the 3rd prequel. I never will because the second Clone Wars was just hilariously bad. And then I watched Force Awakens and Rogue One, which I thought was brilliant. And I thought, right, I've seen 7 of these now, and in 4 of them, there's a planet-sized weapon in them. I mean, how many times can you see the same film with different characters?
Yeah, fair enough. I was never really a Star Wars guy, but the issue I have, and I think it's like the problem with that particular part of the fandom, is they can't just not like something. Like, you don't like it, don't watch it. I mean, again, I think I watched the first couple seasons of Mandalorian. I watched a couple of the other series with Nick. It's fine, it's not really my thing, but it's fine. I respect the craft, and I just don't feel the need to watch any more of it. But man, some of these guys get so fucking worked up. If there's anyone whose house has devil, I think it's that particular part of the Star Wars fandom. A lot of houses, a lot of devils.
I think all cultural fandoms have that toxic base. It's just Star Wars has a bigger reach because it's got a bigger audience, and it seems worse. But I would suspect that if you look at Marvel, DC, even Harry Potter, I would imagine that there's a toxic element to all of those fandoms who hate anything that's outside of their vision of what should be seen.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. Getting involved. I've never liked anything enough to kind of be part of the fandom for it, and I'm not sad about that.
Yeah, I'm not, because you have to interact with other humans.
That's it. You got to go. Was it meet Ray Park?
Yes.
In an autograph expo or something?
Yes, when that girl threatened to stick a sweaty nerd's lightsaber up his arse if he tried to talk to her again.
That was the one. And on the topic of like weird kind of malicious presences, Luke found this other story. It's not really enough to tell it as its own, but I thought I'd share it here because it's kind of related to the House Has Devil one. For me personally, I tend to meditate a lot using candles, and every time I've lit any of my candles, where previously the flame would stay normal, when I meditate, it would move around erratically as if something was trying to control it and move it to burn someone or something. Last night, the flames had been moving erratically again when I went out and blew them out, leaving the room in darkness, and it gave me a feeling of being watched. In one corner, there was this human figure that was sending off waves of malice, and the other was something that was moving towards it. What had really gotten me freaked out, though, was the fact that when I went into shower, mind you, I was in the shower when this happened, and I tend to shower in the dark, it felt like there was a person grabbing on and holding tight to my ankle, biting both my foot and calf repeatedly, and another presence at my back breathing down my neck, wrapping its hands around my neck, squeezing just tight enough as if to remind me that this thing could end my life where I stood. What is going on? How can I stop it? And again, that was just seemed kind of relevant to the House Has Devil one. And unlike the House Has Devil one where this guy was trying to send, or this guy's dad was trying to send bad juju out and clearly pissed something off or attracted something unpleasant. This person sounds like they're maybe a little clueless when it comes to the some of the occult things they're trying to mess with, but it certainly doesn't sound like trying to do anything malicious.
Turkish is a strange language as well, because they've got some strange phrases there that associate with the devil. I know they've got a term which in English means the devil's feather, which essentially means you're a lucky son of a bitch If you got the devil's feather, you're very lucky. You're very charming.
Where?
Where do you have the devil's feather? I think it's just a phrase. I'm not saying they keep it on their person. I think it just, they have the look. I'm not sure.
Okay.
The etymology of the word.
I don't know why this was like a up your ass thing. I don't know. It was just, my first thought was, where is the devil's feather? How did it get there? I don't know if I'm not really into this.
We need the help of some Turkish paranormal investigators or occultists to share some Turkish lore, I think, because there's plenty there if you start digging in. It's like Devil's Castle, and there's some, I'm not sure if it's the same place that known as the seat of Satan is in Turkey. I think it's mentioned in the Old Testament, or in the Bible, certainly.
No kidding. I had no idea.
I think so, yeah. But it's one of those, you go around the world and there's places named after the devil, isn't there? All over the place.
Oh, yeah. I think that anytime you've sort of got a place that either where bad shit happens, owing to environmental factors, or generally where weird things happen, I think it, at least in places with sort of a Christian history, it's the devil.
Absolutely. And we should all learn from the lessons we saw Willow go through in Buffy, that turning to evil eats you alive. Folks,
I'm nodding my head because everything I know about Buffy is 0. But I trust that this is a correct assessment, and I'm with Paul here.
I believe it was the overriding storyline of season 6. I was barely paying attention by this point.
Paying enough attention that it's occurred to you a number of decades hence.
Everybody knows. Even though I may be tough, I'm often scared of what I can feel. So I take my cues for responses from people around me. I also have such a wild imagination that I'm fully capable of freaking myself out. What happened here scared the holy crap out of me, but I didn't allow myself to acknowledge out loud whatever it was at that moment. I very strongly believe in intention and try not to give in to negative energy. The location and names I will keep private, but I was already grown up when my parents moved to a tiny desert base town in Utah. My mum was the school librarian for 23 years at this little public school, built in the 50s or 60s. As a visitor, I always went in through the front doors to the office. I'd only visited my mum a few times during school in her little library. It had a reading dragon and a life-size statue of a beloved fictional character. I was not personally fond of this odd, adorable statue, but my mum talked to it and dressed it for the holidays, and the little kids loved it too, of course. I chalked up my general dislike for the building to the fact that it always stunk like grubby little children and rotten wood. Sorry to those people who love children, but they do leave a stink. I disliked how the school felt, but shrugged it away. Many public schools out west are flat, plain, painted cinder-block buildings with upper-inside windows along the halls. The open layout makes it so you can see into most hallways and classrooms from outside or the opposite wings. All my elementary schools had looked dismally more or less the same. Many of them had given me the same used, unpleasantly familiar, crowded but empty, old feeling when I was young. However, I'd never been back to any of them alone after dark. When my mum retired, I came over from the West Coast to help her clean her library and trim the collection. She struggled with tossing anything, and I flew to help close her deadline to clear out. I love my mum and I also hoard books. I pushed her pretty hard to save what she could and damn the rest. I've worked in used books, so I'm accustomed to the heartache of discards. We filled many boxes full of donations. Piles of books lined the halls outside. We'd also piled the trash out there, as we'd be locked out trying to get to the dumpsters, as the custodian was on vacation. Anyway, on my previous visits, I'd found the teeny-tiny stalls and even tinier toilets in the student ballrooms were way too little for my large person to use, so I had avoided going in there since, and I'd never been on the boys' side until I needed the garbage bags to help my mum clean up that summer day. The custodian's supply room was just inside, past the doorway to the boys' side bathroom. Because I've worked as a janitor, I have a habit of announcing my femme self when I enter a men's room. These restrooms had no doors and were side by side, where the entrance hall met my mum's wing, opposite the staff lounge. When I first went in on the boys' side, I felt what could be the normal, elementary school transgressiveness of being in the wrong bathroom, even though we were, for sure, the only ones there. Alas, I'd spent way too much time cleaning bathrooms to be too much novelty in this. With each trip into the closet for supplies, my feelings began to grow more specific, and a very, very unwelcome menacing of absolutely something bad watching me seemed to be lurking close by. Eventually, I just grabbed up a bunch of stuff and decided not to be in there again. And this was on my first day of the trip. I felt like a ninny for being scared, even though it was a strong, involuntary physical response. That first night we stayed until 7 or so, before it was dark. Mum said she wanted to be out by 9, and I assumed it was the district policy. The next day was Friday, and we barely had time to meet the deadline. Once again, after 3 or 4 p.m, we were the only people in the whole school. I was a little out of patience with my loving mother when I discovered that, in addition to the treasures of her library, we also needed to clear out 2 large storage spaces. These unused areas were located across the hall from the bathrooms, between the teacher's lounge and office area. Leaving my mum to tearfully catalogue a stack of stragglers, I set out to basically toss or recycle 20 years' worth of holiday and book fair decorations. This whole time, I was very much aware that I was not alone, and I worked as fast and as quietly as possible. I did not want to be in that hall or those storage cubbies after dark. No siree. The lurking feeling got stronger and more ominous, seeming to seethe down the hall up to the doorway of the library, coming from the bathrooms. I felt cornered in, followed, and watched in the small storage areas. It was all I could do not to run away back to my mum. After a stern lecture to my cowardly heart, I gave up sorting on the mess and just shoved it all into trash bags. Thus, I quickly finished those storage areas. My mum was tired and sad to leave her school. We still had a very steep amount of cleaning and at least 3 sections of shelves to trim. We were up to our eyeballs in dust and books, working until it was dark, with only the emergency lights lighting the halls. She'd turned on the real lights right in our part of the hall, though, but the evil feeling was still there, but it seemed worse. My mum had also locked us in, once it was dark, without saying anything. I felt safe enough with her in the library, even though it still felt that something was lurking near us in that empty hall. It felt very much like we were cornered by some angry, vengeful watcher. Eventually my mum said she'd just want us to go home. I looked down at my watch and it was still only 8 p.m. and we had an hour, so I said we should grind on. The end of our task was in sight. We powered through and managed to catalogue or trim all the relevant materials. All that was left was to load some personal things and donations to take them away. We decided to do this on the next day because the car was full. At least the district's to-do list was complete in time for her to turn in her keys. I do remember forcing myself not to look back as I walked to the end of the hall and the lights of that fire exit. I waited arms full while Mum locked the classroom door. She went around the corner to drop her keys to the office, then hit the hall lights off. I've never in my adult life been more afraid of the dark than in those few moments it took for my mum to come back down that very short hallway. I've huge goosebumps now trying to write this. The dark shadows from the rest of the school seemed to rush to eat us both alive. I mean to say that I could feel with every inch of my being that something or many things were angry with us, and present. Like the predator was actually right beside you about to gobble your ass, now run type of physical animal certainty. My mum moved slowly and tired towards me. I tried to be cool and not to scream, but there was nothing to be seen or heard. I felt like if I showed an inch of fear or acknowledgement, my mum and I would both be done for. We left, checked the door behind us, and crammed into the car. Since I was also tired and I watched way too many movies, I just shook off the horror show feeling. Honestly, everywhere I go in Utah has some level of scary, crappy energy. I didn't want to complain or to scare my mum. I was just very glad to be done. I also didn't want to admit what a chicken I am. My mum said something how she hoped any restaurants might still be open, and I realised my watch was on Pacific time. We'd left the school around 11:30, not 9:30 like I thought. The next morning we went back to fetch the remaining items. School started that very next week. Many of the staff were prepping their classrooms. One of them waved and sent his teenage kid to open the fire door for us, the one we'd exited the night before. Everything was too sunny and loudly fine. My mum went into his classroom, and after introductions, the kid politely offered to help me carry things to the car, and my mum stayed to chat with her colleagues. The boy said casually as we walked up the hall, "So, you were here last night. Did you hear the ghosts?" Trying to be cool, I said, "No. Has that happened to you?" Then this young kid tells me, all nonchalant, about how he's heard the ghostly children voices, that people had seen ghost figures or heard footsteps across empty halls and the empty roof of that wing for many years. No one seemingly stays at the school alone or after dark, even the janitors. I tried not to barf or cry. He sort of smiled kindly at the look on my face and said, "Scares my dad a lot too, and that his dad won't be here anymore alone at night, since that one night he and another teacher chased some voices that also slammed doors, but no one was there." I felt like someone was pouring ice into my guts. Even the dusty sunlight seemed scary. I could see he was trying to be nice by changing the subject of conversation. I did not tell him what had happened and how scared I was, but he seemed to feel bad for bringing it up. Once Mum and I were both safe in the car again later, I brought up what the kid had said to me. I told her how scared I was in the bathroom and the night before, and just then in the broad daylight, even with other people. In response, she just casually threw out how the staff had all heard and seen creepy stuff for years, especially in the tunnels. The what? That go from the boys' bathroom under the school to the other side of the gym. She calmly said that's why she always tries to be out by 9, because she knows she cannot fight whatever it is alone or after dark, since she wouldn't let it into her library. At this point, nothing on earth could have got me back into that school. She's very religious, so her matter-of-fact reaction surprised me. 3 cheers to my mum, the brave little librarian who apparently educated several generations of kids while terrible lurking nasties crept around their school. I did not know what to say sitting there in the bright summer sun. I just cried. It was a terrible, no-good, very bad weekend. I really hate visiting Utah.
You know, I've not spent enough time in Utah to really talk shit about it. I've been through Salt Lake. I've been to the Salt Flats. Very beautiful area. So I can't talk shit about Utah. But I will say, my one awkward encounter in Utah nicely ties in with a little bonus story I found after this one.
Okay.
So I'm going to read the bonus story first because it ties in with schoolyard haunting. It says, negative spirits or experiences are thankfully rare for me. And even when they do pop up, they're brief and I leave them behind quickly. I was in a building full of classrooms in Provo, Utah, which was open for dark after study. There were about 10 of us studying in a room and getting ready to leave. I got up with a friend to fill up my water bottle at a fountain just down the hall. Other rooms were empty and the doors all closed, but the room just behind and to the left of the fountain had its door barely cracked open, about 3 inches. While we walked past it to return to our friends, I caught a glimpse of something that terrified me and made me not just scared, but triggered a kind of fight response in me. It was a hand just wrapping around the door and a face coming to peek out of the dark room. Short and just barely at the height of the door handle. Whatever it was had a kind of gray-green color, and from the briefest glance I got of it, the eyes seemed yellow-blue. Not green, but yellow with a weird blue about it. It felt decidedly negative and malicious, though not very powerful. I felt stalked, and at the same time coaxed towards it. Honestly, there was no way ever that I would have gone to investigate it. I didn't tell my friend, but instead asked a couple of guys in our group if they would just do me a little favor and go close the door. They didn't get why I was so scared, but I just said I would feel a lot better if they would just go close the door all the way before we left. They did, and didn't feel anything weird. I shy from going towards places or things that would invite paranormal experiences since I have a lot already. I'm honestly afraid to open myself to more than what comes naturally. And I thought this was really interesting, Paul. One, again, because my one weird Utah experience was in Provo. It was at an Olive Garden in Provo and had nothing to do with the paranormal, but just with the fact that I don't know that aside from a bar in Armagh, if I've ever walked into a place and so quickly been clocked by every single person there as not belonging. We were passing through Provo, my friends and I, it was me and Nick and a couple of our friends. We were on this big, long road trip, the kind of thing you can get away with in your early 30s. Taking 2 weeks off, worked at 4 of you together. We'd never been to Olive Garden, so we stopped at one in Provo, and boy, oh boy, that whole restaurant just turned and looked like we were an invasive organism in an ecosystem. Oof. Ate my endless breadsticks real fast and got the hell out of there.
Well, to be fair, I always have a bad negative experience at schools in general. That's how I viewed. My school wasn't haunted at all, but it left me with a dark, creepy feeling every day I had to spend in that shithole.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. In fact, but I've on the opposite of that, I've got a friend who loves September because they have this sort of association with like fresh packs of paper and pencils and pens, and it's exactly the opposite for me. Whenever I'd start seeing back to school stuff on television and seeing the displays in stores, even now I get this kind of cold dread in my stomach, this sense of like darkness closing in.
Yes, I've always over the years I've been involved in people going, "Oh, school days, best days of your life," and they all start having these wonderful stories about school, and they say, "Oh, what was your best memory of school?" The day I left.
Yep, 100%.
Hated every minute of it, other than playing football.
I'll never forget the last day of school. These two guys who I'm still friendly with one of them. I'm friendly with both. I don't see them very much, but after a ceremony of some kind, they said, "Hey, Brennan, we're going to go get ice cream. Do you want to join us?" And never the entire time during school had they ever done anything like this. And so I said, "Yeah, sure, let's." And we went for it. We had a wonderful time. And I thought, you motherfuckers, why didn't you invite me before this? Before we move on to the next story, there was a story I ended up taking out of the show because I was like, nah, it was pretty borderline. It was in the script right up to the end, but it talked about mining in Utah.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that Utah was such a hotbed of mining. I suppose I should have, but it just never occurred to me. It used to be a real coal mining place, among other things. So I decided to look into some old newspaper accounts to see if there's any mention of things like Tommyknockers.
Yes.
And I found this from, I think, the Salt Lake Times. And so I thought I would share this article quickly before we moved on, because there will be another mention a little bit later of Tommyknockers. So this article, again, I forgot to record the date, but it's entitled, "Remember Tommyknockers." When the Cornish miners emigrated to the mines of Utah and Nevada, they brought with them their belief in Tommyknockers. Usually invisible, these dwarf-like men might show their presence at times and were mischievous and full of pranks. The miners believed, however, that the little figures would always give them advance warning of dire events such as cave-ins. If a miner was awakened by the sounds of a Tommyknocker between midnight and 2 in the morning, and he followed the sound, he would come upon a strike. In the Tintic district, there was a dwarf-like figure with a beard to the floor who used to playfully chase the miners. John Greenway tells in Folklore of the Great West of a wicked dwarf in Park City who had arms long enough to remove his sandals without stooping, and powerful enough to pull himself up ladders without the aid of his feet. These he used to kick out the rungs of the ladders so that the miners would become trapped. Tales are told of loaded ore carts moving uphill on tracks pushed by unseen hands, and many a terrified miner threw down his pick and shovel and abandoned the diggings in haste. Workmen who saw a phantom white horse or mule roaming through the tunnels believed it was a spirit or soul of someone who had been killed in a mine accident. A miner long departed from this life can sometimes be heard working at night in the diggings of an old mine in Gold Hill. In a Park City mine, a phantom white horse was seen carrying a beautiful woman with long blonde tresses and radiant skin. But when the miners questioned her, she disappeared from view. And I'd never heard of the association of the white horse thing with Tommyknockers, so I thought that was particularly interesting.
Yeah, it's not, because Cornwall doesn't have a white horse.
Oh, so that's not part of the lore there?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm certainly no expert on Cornish folklore, but we've got several white horses here in England. I think the nearest one to Cornwall is in Wiltshire, which is the famous one.
Right.
And Wiltshire's not exactly that close, but it's close, but it's not that. But what surprised me there is I wasn't aware that there was a Cornish population that moved to Utah. So that's news to me.
Interesting. Yeah, it was a surprise to me as well.
Do they not eat scones in Utah then?
I would assume they do. I don't know. I know very little. I don't even know enough about Utah to make jokes. Aside from what I learned for this episode, anything I'd say would be a wild speculation.
Yeah, but it's a place steeped in mystery and it's certainly got plenty of lore, both from the recent population and also the tribal lore that are there as we dance around, not mentioning the certain danger word for the state.
Yes. The certain overused term that originates in the Uinta Basin.
Yes, that one. And so I'm just amazed sometimes because I would think, well, why? I suppose they were probably recruited by mining companies because the Cornish, like Yorkshiremen and the Welsh, are renowned for their mining abilities. So we like digging.
Hey man, if you're good at something,
dig.
Lean into it. Yep, dig. I didn't get the Italian gene for building shit out of bricks, so I got a podcast. Fresh powder. This is my first account of possible paranormal activity I've experienced in my life. It takes place in Brigham City, Utah, during the winter of 2007. My wife and I and our 2 cats had moved to a new rental house across town a few months prior. Almost directly across the street from us was a mortuary. In fact, you could see it through the living room window. At first, my wife wasn't sure if she was okay with the idea of living across the street from a mortuary. However, after some reassurance from me and a lack of other housing options, she settled in with the situation. Over the course of these few months after moving in, leading up to the incident, we'd both noticed and experienced strange things happening in the house. It was never really serious or felt threatening in any way, just little things that would mess with your mind a bit. For instance, car keys would turn up missing and we'd find them in strange places. Chairs would be moved and pulled out from the table. Generally, I'd find this in the middle of the night, stubbing my toe on the way to the bathroom. Our cats would act a little strange sometimes and move and behave almost as if they were being pet by invisible someone or something. Another time, we'd just returned from the local Smith's with some groceries. We were both putting groceries away and setting out a few to prepare dinner that evening. I had just put away a can of Pam cooking spray in the lowest shelf in the pantry. My wife reminded me she needed it to help prepare dinner and asked if I could go get it. I looked inside the pantry for that cooking spray and it was gone. I looked, and it was nowhere to be found. My wife couldn't understand it either. She'd just witnessed me putting it away. She came over to look for it too. Together we pulled out every item from the pantry and could not find that cooking spray. We searched the car, no dice. I went back to the store and asked the lady at checkout if we'd left a bag. Nope. So I then concluded maybe we hadn't actually bought it at all. Just thought we did. So I bought a can of Pam and headed home. When I got home, I immediately began assisting my wife with dinner preparations and handed her the cooking spray. We finished preparing dinner, put it in the oven to cook, and sat down to watch some TV while we waited. Finally, after dinner, we started to clean up and put things away. My wife handed me the Pam to put into the pantry, and out on the floor falls, you guessed it, the original can. It was then we decided there was more to these strange things than meets the eye. We would have more of the same strange things, like items going missing or being moved would continue to happen occasionally over the next few weeks. When something of the sort would happen, we would chalk it up to the trickster ghost. We would talk to them coolly and casually, stating how funny they were for doing these things, maintaining a calm atmosphere. Again, we never felt threatened or scared, and we just went about our lives coexisting with this trickster. A couple months went by, and we were now in the thick of a fairly heavy winter. One early morning, I was awakened by something. I really can't say what it was, but I just felt off. I looked at the clock and it was 2:47 a.m. I was a little upset because I had to get up in a little over half an hour to get ready for work. My wife stirred a little bit as I got up, then I went to the kitchen to drink some water. She stayed in bed asleep. As I was getting my drink, I started hearing strange creaks and noises. It seemed to be moving around outside of the house. I listened intently for a few minutes and then the noises seemed to stop. I wondered if it was maybe punk kids messing around. I looked out the window and noticed it was snowing and had been most of the night, as we had probably close to 5 inches of snow on the ground. I decided to go back to bed for a few more minutes before getting up for work. After a few minutes, I began to hear the noises again and felt almost nauseous. I got a weird, prickly, warm feeling at the back of my neck, and my hair stood on end. At that time, our cats, both of which slept in our bed, came out from the covers and both puffed out their fur. They started growling and hissing and staring at the wall. I looked and couldn't see anything. They both remained focused, staring, growling, and hissing, essentially ready for a fight. The racket from the cats startled and woke my wife. She sat up and asked me what was wrong. What's going on? I said, I'm not sure. The cats just freaked out and started growling and hissing. Then we heard the doorknob on the front door begin to shake violently, as if someone was trying to break in. We both jumped out of bed and ran to the front door. We both witnessed the doorknob shaking. I told her I'd heard some noises earlier moving around outside the house and how I thought it was just some punk kids messing around. My wife decided to run to the phone and call 911. And I said, don't call 911. It's not a burglar. It's probably just some punk kids. Hey, guy, those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. Just saying. Then I finally had enough and yelled, "You damn kids, I'm coming out to beat your ass." Again, Paul, just to stop quickly, no one who ever says that's actually going to do that. It's like the guy says, "Man, I'm going to tear out your goddamn lungs." No, you're not. You're going to keep drinking yourself slowly to death, and I'm going to keep doing whatever the fuck it was I wanted to do in the first place. Anyways, that's my cynical take on these things. Just then, the doorknob stopped shaking. I just knew I'd scared them off, and they were scattering to run away. Yeah, sure they were, buddy. So I decided to really put the fear of God into them and chase them down the street. Oh, for God's sakes, Jesus fucking Christ. I read this when I put it in the script. I just forgot how stupid it was. Don't do this, guys. Just don't. If for some reason your threats of karate manage to scare off intruders, don't then follow them out of the house. You won. But this guy clearly had not been listening to my self-help tapes, so he decided to chase them down the street. This will teach those damn punk kids, I thought. Sure. My wife tried to convince me that running into the night during a snowstorm wasn't a good idea and to just let them go, but I was upset and I knew better. Oh man, this poor woman. If I was her, I would let him go, Paul. Just let them out and have him. I opened the door to run outside, and as I did, snow fell over my bare feet and onto the floor. The fresh, undisturbed powder had drifted up my doorway and toppled over when the door stopped supporting it as it opened. I stared out and looked in bewilderment at nothing. Absolutely nothing. No kids, no tracks in the snow, nothing. Nothing but 5+ inches of fresh powder covering the porch, stairs, lawn, everything. There was no way for anybody to reach the doorknob without disturbing the snow. It was at this point that I became somewhat scared, mostly just unsettled as to what had just transpired. Shortly after, the cats calmed down and went back to sleep. My wife and I, however, didn't go back to sleep that night. In fact, she had me take a sick day from work. We turned on all the lights in the house, listened to Disney music, and played board games until the late morning. This incident was different than the previous ones. The uneasy feeling, nausea, and hair standing on end. This wasn't our normal trickster ghost that we had been accustomed to. This was something more. It seemed aggressive and angry. We never had more incidents like this one in the house, and we stayed there a while longer, but moved out a few months later due to unrelated circumstances. And I don't know how many of my little interjections I'm going to leave in the edit there, Paul, but just to repeat, folks, if someone's banging on your door in the middle of the night and you manage to chase them off, don't follow them down the road. Don't do it in a blizzard. That is moronic. Nothing about this is worth you getting frostbite. As
Admiral Akbar would say, it's a trap.
1,000%. Yeah, that's the Mad Max gif. That's bait. If they're like, "Oh, Gov, you've scared us. Don't come outside and whoop our asses now," you are about to get a lead pipe upside the head. Man alive. Actually, there's a really great book. I'm just going to look up the title. If we have any independent horror fiction fans in the audience, you might recognize the name of the book, Stolen Tongues, by Felix Blackwell. The first half of it, I would say, is really great. The second half is fine, but it doesn't necessarily live up to the promise of the first half. But it is still, again, if you like horror fiction, check out Stolen Tongues. But the opening really kind of reminds me of this. It's about a snowbound cabin, might even be in Utah, actually. I'm not 100% sure. But very scary horror fiction book. Worth checking out. All right. So, and I mentioned some stuff from Park City because we had a story from Park City and I pulled it, but I wanted to share these two little bits. So one is an excerpt from, because God help me, I can't help myself. This is actually something I wrote. It's an article I wrote for Rev'd Quarterly a couple years ago. Rev'd is no longer available online, but I have the original text, and it was an article on haunted ski resorts that I did for them. And this ties into what we were talking about earlier with the Tommyknockers. So this is, this is the excerpt from Haunted Powder. Park City is another former mining town, but looking out over the snow-covered expanse of its 7,300 skiable acres, the second largest in the U.S., you'd never know the mountain beneath was threaded with abandoned silver mines. In fact, some 1,610 kilometers of mine tunnels remain, all that is left of the former Ontario mine, once considered the greatest silver mine in the world. It is there the hauntings of Park City begin. As far back as the late 19th century, miners would tell stories of an evil presence they felt dogging them beneath the earth, and of the Tommyknockers, legendary creatures said to be 2 feet tall, who would try to confuse miners by knocking on walls and ladders as they fled emergencies. The mines may be closed now, but there are spirits to be found all over Park City. Restaurant Flanagan's on Main started to bleed employees because things were, according to its owner, getting too weird. Not everyone can handle working somewhere they hear phantom footsteps or see from the corner of their eye something rush past them. Footsteps are heard over at the Egyptian Theater as well, and employees also claim that when no one else is around, doors will fly open and the sound of organ music will drift out over the empty seats. And then I found this from the Park City Record, the newspaper, from March 12th, 1992, and this is from the police blotter. Copper-bottom Tommyknockers, which sounds like a sex thing, but it's not. Individuals were allegedly knocking on doors at the Copper Bottom Inn at 10:30 p.m. March 4th. An officer checked the situation out, reported he hadn't seen anyone while he was in the building, and had locked all the levels. Now, I don't know if this was a bunch of kids just playing Nicky Nicky Nine Door, or Ding Dong Ditch, or whatever the hell it is people call it now.
Bobby knocking.
Bobby knocking? So I don't know if that was, I'm assuming that's what it was, but I also love the idea that it was just another one of Park City's ghosts.
A cheeky one at that.
I know I'd be pissed if someone knocked on my hotel door at midnight.
Depends who's knocking. If it's not Charlie Theron, I'm disappointed.
Yeah, that makes two of us, my friend.
I know you'd be disappointed for me, so thank you.
So our next story is a little different. This is a newspaper article. This is from the Salt Lake Herald, dated Saturday, August 15th, 1896. And so I will read from this, but Paul, if you have any comments, please feel free to jump in. This is very much your area of expertise. This is about the Farmington Poltergeist. So it opens with, and I love newspapers back then. They didn't fuck around. People are scared. Supposed ghost at Farmington throws rocks at people. Several have been hit.
Good.
Farmington is excited. Many of the people up here are extremely nervous, and some of them go to bed these warm nights, and after covering up their heads, lie awake with profuse perspiration, trembling with fear. Man, they really didn't fuck around.
It's amazing how far the editorial standards have fallen in newspapers these days.
I never know how much anyone is sweating anymore.
Or trembling.
Again, I have to... anyways, let's not. Farmington has a ghost sensation which is stirring up the city, which said matter is similar to those which are occasionally heard in country towns. On a farm at Farmington live a family named Hess, and it is at the Hess home the wraiths of the departed are supposed to be getting in their work. It isn't generally believed that spirits are tangible enough to throw rocks at anyone, but in this case the rule has been broken, and the rocks are not only thrown, but they hit people, and while no one has been hurt, dornicks fairly fill the air when the shades or whatever they are get into motion. It is stated that after Sable Night has thrown her black mantle over the face of Earth, goddamn, on certain portions of the Hess farm, it is not safe for anyone to go with a member of the Hess family to those certain portions because rocks promiscuously permeate the atmosphere. I love this. It has been tried by several people, and the town is wrought up over it. The business has been going on for some time, and many of the people up there have gone ghost hunting from time to time. No pale, shadowy forms have been seen. No headless horseman has ridden his black charger across the fields. The skeleton hands of men who are supposed to rise up from their graves and walk the earth after sundown have been conspicuous for their absence. No wail of the lost has smote the ear, but chunks of trachyte, gray granite, porphyry, and other solid matter have whizzed around the ears of the investigating parties, and their particular hairs have stood on end, like the quill upon the fretful porcupine. Their young blood has had frosts, commotion has seized their souls, and with the feeling of terror done a 3-hands-round figure to the accompaniment of flying debris. Accompanying the stone-throwing there have been perceptible electric shocks, say those who have witnessed these remarkable demonstrations. Whether this latter statement be true or not is a question. It is the opinion of the sensible people up there that all the electricity business is a result of the imagination of those who have declared they felt them. When a person is scared, his or her, as the case may be, hair will stand up and a cold shiver will chase itself up and down the spinal column. So this may be the sensation which has been described as electric. I love, Paul, that even back in 1896 we have this really shitty, lazy skepticism.
It's a constant.
It really is. So the article goes on to say, the news of these ghostly pranks circulated among the good people up there from neighbor to neighbor, and many of them decided to investigate. Parties were organized and a search made for the spirits. The ground where the shade of the supposed unhappy and rock-throwing departed does the work is covered with brush, and a ghost is a hard thing to chase under all the circumstances. so all the parties have met with hard luck. One outfit, consisting of nearly 50 persons, went out one night but neglected to take anyone of the Hess family along, and as a result, there were no rocks thrown. Whoever this ghost is, he, she, or it has a grudge against the Hess people. Anyone can roam around the farm and have no fear if he be alone, but let a Hess accompany him and the spectre hurls showers of missiles. These rocks seem to come from no place in particular, according to accounts. One may hear a stone whizzing past him from the front and get hit the next instant by a pebble from the rear. He may evade a stone from the north by northeast and get one from the direction of the Southern Cross as he straightens up. A few nights ago, a young man armed himself with a double-barreled shotgun, loaded for bear, elephants, or ghosts, and went out as brave as a lion. He was going to have a ghost for breakfast if it took a leg. He wandered around the brush looking for shrouded forms to shoot at, but nary a shrouded form did he see. But he had one of the family with him, and was told to bide his time. He did. Zip! Came a Donnybrook biscuit past his ear. I don't know what that is. He waited after the location in front where the same evidently came from, with both barrels of his fusee cocked, I don't know what that is either, and got a beautiful specimen of lime formation of a pound weight between the shoulders. He wasn't angry, not at all. He was just scared. He fired both barrels in the air, and he and the Hess he had with him made tracks with the toes pointing in direction of the house. The ghost presumably had a good shady laugh over the foot race. And anyways, this goes on, and I will probably do... I don't know, I think you got the gist of it. I was going to say I'll read the rest for patrons, but you get the gist of it there. But that's obviously, I mean, we would call that a poltergeist.
Yes.
Correct, Paul?
Absolutely. I miss the days where the neighbours would just turn up en masse to watch. There's loads of reports from sort of the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, that whenever a poltergeist is reported, be it in the States, in Canada, in Britain, in Australia, all the neighbours turn up and just hang about outside. Or they even start, they just come in and go, right, where's the ghost? What's going on? What's happening here? There's a ghost, is there? Where is it then? And just start traipsing about.
This is what cell phones took from us. We used to just invade our neighbor's privacy for entertainment.
Yeah, it's a classic poltergeist manifestation. Stone throwing is one of their calling cards, or certainly throwing objects. But there's a lot of stone throwing stories over the years.
And you were saying that you are sort of vaguely aware of the Farmington Poltergeist?
I've heard it mentioned. I don't know too much about it. I just know it's a classic 19th century poltergeist case. It's like the Dag family in Canada one, which is from about the same era.
Oh, okay.
I think that happened in is Ottawa in Quebec?
No, Ottawa's Ontario.
Ontario.
It's not far from Quebec.
Yeah, it's one or the other. I can't remember which one it is, but that was all around a young girl called Dina, and that's very strange because it manifested itself as a talking flame.
Oh, that's very Old Testament.
And disappeared after. It was a very quick one as well. It was only around for about 3 months.
Interesting.
Trying to think more about it. But yeah, that was sort of around, I don't know, about 1890-ish, I think. I know they were called the Dag family. D-A-G-G.
Okay. I mean, it does seem peculiar that it only seemed to happen when the family was present, which I guess isn't all that dissimilar from the things you've told me about. Oh, shit, what's a really famous case that we talk about all the time?
Enfield?
Yeah. It kind of seems similar to that, where you could say, oh, well, they were there, so obviously they're the ones perpetrating it. But, there's no obvious way for that to be the case.
The battery, as always, they are there and it occurs because they are the battery that is creating whatever is flying around the room. I know Guy Lyon Playfair used to say that these were just balls of some kind of energy that would feed off people of fear, and the more fear, the stronger they became. I mean, when I spoke with Barry Taff, the famous entity investigator, he began to notice some really weird correlations between epilepsy and poltergeist cases, that in some cases he'd investigated, a member of the family was classed as epileptic. Not in all, but certainly in enough cases for it to become interesting, shall we say. But there's all kinds of different ones, like the wonderful Pete, the poltergeist who lived in a lawnmower repair shop for a bit. He used to like wanging pennies about.
There's really there's a lot of that with the coins.
Yes, a lot of coins. Which case was it? It was on the Netflix, the Navajo episode, where they were speaking to the Navajo Rangers.
Oh, yeah, was that Unexplained?
No, it was on, Unsolved Mysteries.
That's it, yes.
And they investigated a poltergeist case, and one of them had kept a jar full of coins that were found during the haunting.
Of course, I forgot about that.
In a big old jar of them, and he kept them, which is good. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff like pebbles and coins and pins and things. There's they do like chucking stuff about, but which kind of shows it's a very kinetic force of energy, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
explosive.
Well, on the subject of sort of lazy skepticism, as I mentioned in the story itself, about a week after this, I found a follow-up letter to the editor where someone wrote to the Salt Lake Tribune and basically asserted that, well, obviously this is someone who's trying to scare the family out and drive down the price of their land so they can buy it from them. And I just thought, I mean, how do you explain any of this?
Yeah. Well, it's because it's an obvious explanation, therefore it must be the reason. You know, like the Black Monk of Pontefract is another one of them. Typical, well, you know, working class families that were never happy. It's that kind of thing. They were always arguing. They were all desperate for attention. Well, if they were that, I'd love to see, if I was a teenager, I'd be able to drag myself up the stairs by my neck just so I wanted my parents to take notice of me, or pin myself under a bureau without causing any injury, but just to get attention from my family.
And that is classist bullshit.
Oh, of course it is. Well, that's a lot of things because, you know, a lot of skeptics, you've got no scientific method. If you want to talk about these kind of things, then you really need to be talking about biology or physics or electricity. You want to be talking about the world around us, because I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all explanation for poltergeist cases. I think there are different causes to different cases, because if it was the same causation or the same sort of ingredients in every case, then the reactions would be the same. And yet there are very distinct. Okay, Humpty Doo was blamed on the woman. It's like 5 people live in a house and they blame it on the woman. They go, oh yeah, well, we caught the woman throwing a pebble. That doesn't explain the priest's Bible being ripped out of his hands and stuck to the ceiling in front of witnesses, or a shower of stones landing on reporters' heads, the messages left in pebbles in the bathroom, the strange noises, the writings. For a lot of them, they're not bothered. They just want to stitch people up. Lights out. It all started in the summer of 2005, when my boyfriend's sister Billy moved from Ogden to a small trailer park in Centerville. Her boyfriend at the time would come down and visit 3 times a week. On the nights he was sleeping over, he would swear he saw a face in the window at night. Billy would tell us about this, but we used to just laugh it off like, yeah, right. Then my boyfriend, who's Billy's brother, moved in with her, and I would come over and hang out every night. She and her boyfriend would watch nothing but scary movies. Early one morning, she called and asked if I'd like to come over and hang out with her for the whole day. When I got over there, she told me she'd heard something going through her stuff while she was in the bathroom, so we stood in the living room in silence, listening. Sure enough, we both heard papers moving about. We ran to the back bedroom to find nothing was moved. I told her we should just go out for the day and forget it. But from then on, she heard it happen every day. A year went by and she was dating a new guy. He also liked scary movies. He moved in, and all he did was watch scary movies. One night in particular, back in August 2006, we all went to bed. Billy fell asleep on the couch, and me and her brother in the front bedroom. 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke her shaking me. I got up and went into the living room with her, and she said that she'd woken up and a dead man was laying on top of her, staring at her. She said she couldn't move, and then she blinked twice, and he was gone. And after that, she moved out, and I don't blame her. When I was at home during the day, I would see out of the corner of my eye a head pop out and look at me once a while from the back room. I just ignored it, thinking I was seeing things. But I'd also hear the scrambling of papers in that room. Every time I go and check, nothing was moved. I had to work late one night, leaving my boyfriend at home waiting to come and get me. It was about 10 o'clock, and he was taking a quick snooze on the couch when he heard a loud bang from the hallway. He got up to see what it was, but he couldn't see anything had happened, so he just sat down, and then the loud banging noises got louder and faster. As it came up the hallway, the lights began to shut off in the hallway. Then the kitchen lights shut off. My boyfriend set off and ran towards the door, and as he did so, the living room lights also shut off. As he was shutting the door, he felt a breath on his neck. In March the following year, we came home from celebrating with our friends on our engagement. It was about 12:35, and we both crashed out on the bed. Only 10 minutes had passed, and we were almost asleep when, bam! We both jumped and looked at each other. Something had hit our bedroom wall from the other side, which was the living room. We sat quietly waiting and watching, staring at the doorway into the pitch-black living room, thinking someone had broken in. Then something black ran past our door, and we heard nothing. We both got up fast and turned the light and shut the door, and we slept with that light on for the rest of the night.
I tell you what, Paul, if someone calls me over to their house in order to keep them company after they've seen a ghost, you better fucking tell me.
Oh, no, I like surprises.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm here. Oh, cool. Well, there was just a monster in the closet. You want a soda or something? No, I would like to go very far away.
I'm really glad you're here. Have you seen Killer Clowns from Outer Space? Because I think that's what's in my attic.
Still the second scariest thing in Utah after Tim Ballard.
Oh, the Utah Jazz.
No, well, I feel like they don't deserve to be lumped in with old Tim.
Depends which NBA franchise you follow.
Those rivalries run deep.
Yes,
apparently.
They probably do, as they do in all sports. Just look at those losers, Dallas Cowboys.
It's all about the coaching, Paul. As long as they can stay healthy. All right, well, that was our look at some scary stories from Utah. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. Let us know if you have a story from Utah itself, either your story or a story you know of. ghoststoryguys@gmail.com. We love doing these location-based episodes. It allows me to get real weird with some research and look up, as you heard, old newspaper articles because, man, there is a lot of this shit out there. It just typically does not get looked at very often. We are going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with our Ghost Force shoutouts. Hey there, listeners. Before you reach for that skip 15 seconds ahead button, I promise you this isn't an ad. We wanted to take a minute to talk to you about mental health. On this show, I've always tried to be as honest and open as possible about my struggles with depression and anxiety, because even though we've come a long way towards acknowledging the very real damage these things can do, there is still way too much lingering stigma about reaching out for help. And when you start to feel like there's no help, it's easy to start feeling like there's no hope. But Paul has joined me today to remind you there is always hope and there's always help.
We're not going to try and talk you out of self-harming right now, because we know that's not how it works. Instead, what we wanted to do was tell you something now and hope that should things get bad, you'll remember it and make a phone call or send a text message before you make any permanent decisions. As someone who knows all too well just how important mental health can be, it's never too late to reach out.
In Canada, the number to call is 133-456-4566. In the USA, the new number to call is 988. That's 988.
In the UK, the number to call is 116123 or text SHOUT, that's SHOUT, to 85258. In Australia, the number to call is 131114.
However bad shit seems, it will pass. And no matter what your brain might be telling you at any given moment, and believe me when I say I know this intimately, there are people who love you and people who care deeply about how you treat yourself. Should a time come when you find yourself despairing, please know that we've both been where you are, and there is a way back to the world. Take care. Welcome back. The Ghost Story Guys are Luke Greensmith, who helps us find our stories. He's also host of the Luke Lore podcast, available everywhere fine podcasts live. Tanya Downing, who manages our Facebook community She is also co-host of the Streaming Into Madness podcast with Walter Whitaker. Sarah Kent, who manages our Reddit community. Joseph Camo, who helps manage our YouTube account. Brody Daniels, our news story intern.
Our paranormal conductor is Mr. Brennan Storr.
And of course, my friend, my co-host, is the one, the only, the inimitable Paul Bestel, the paranormal Johnny Carson himself, host of Mysteries and Monsters. Paul, what's coming up on M&M?
I interview the marvellous Rick D'Ambert in Florida as we talk about his latest book about the magic and myth of crows and ravens. And we are delightfully joined by some of his friends towards the end of the interview, which was one of those things that you could be quite cynical about, where I was quite delighted because I'd heard him speak to a few other people in the past, and they'd turned up on there. So it was lovely because obviously he lives in Florida, so he was outside on his laptop speaking with me, and then the crows turned up towards the end.
Where can everyone find you online?
You can find Mysteries and Monsters across all social media platforms and podcast sites.
Fabulous. I'm Largely the Truth on Threads, Instagram, Blue Sky, and Letterboxd. And you can find my horror movie podcast, Weird Together, everywhere fine podcasts live. As I said at the top of the show, none of this is possible without our patrons, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube subscribers. Genuinely, you make it possible for us to keep this big old train moving, and we are deeply, deeply grateful. And if you've ever thought, boy, what the hell do those guys get that I don't? As a non-subscriber, let me tell you, you get bonus conversations between me and Paul. You get paranormal articles read by me, episodes of Host Adventures where I kind of talk about what's going on with me, ramble on about my life. There's also extended versions of the interviews we've done on this show and so much more. So again, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or sign up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via YouTube or Apple Podcasts, and you'll get access to all that cool stuff, as well as an ad-free version of the show. And who doesn't want that? Ads suck. Again, that's patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or sign up to Ghost Story Guys Premium via Apple Podcasts or YouTube. And of course, if you sign up to Patreon or YouTube at the $20 level, you become part of a very elite club. And that place is a little something we like to call Ghost Force. That's right. Patrons at the $20 level and above become members of Ghost Force because you're crazy and we love you for it.
Yeah.
This time around, the members of Ghost Force are
Ethan Saragon,
Bren wears a pink tutu,
Cackling Skull,
Crazy Mom,
City,
Flowy Two Hats,
Generic Bob,
Hannah Brown,
Anna Simmons,
Hilary DeSaussure,
Jade Moores,
Jenny Bananani,
Jason R. Slatter,
Jennifer Mullen,
Joseph Como,
Kimberly Hansen,
Malevolent Clamato,
Mara Noriega,
Mark Semler,
Megan Rocket,
Merlin Hansen,
Nicola,
Peer Gun 08.5,
Rebecca Brink,
Rempet,
Robin Teen,
Rockin' Ronnie Shenanigans,
Scrapbot 13. That was a robot. I don't know how well I came across. I really tensed up a lot when I did that, and I think I pulled something.
Shannon Steyer,
Stephen Schwarzwald.
Trent Cannon.
You are the few. You are the spooky. You are Ghost Force. For real, guys, thank you so much. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate every single one of you. We value all our patrons, Apple Podcast and YouTube subscribers, but the folks in Ghost Force are truly nuts, and we really do deeply, deeply appreciate it. So again, if you want to have your name read out every second story episode, head to patreon.com/ghoststoryguys or sign up to Ghost Force via YouTube. Shout out to our composer, Rainy Days for Ghosts. Rainy Days for Ghosts is a project of film journalist and composer Harper Smith. You can find more from Harper at rainydaysforghosts.bandcamp.com or by searching for Rainy Days for Ghosts wherever you get your tunes. Our theme song, Radio, Into the Darkness We Go, is composed and performed by Peter Kursoff of Pizzanta Music. Find more from him by searching for Pizzanta Music wherever you stream your music. And I guess that's going to do it.
We'll be back next week, but until then,
into the darkness we go.
I think this is Dodgeball 2.
I just want to see if I get a reaction out of you.
I was talking about wombats the other day. They got square poos.
Okay, I learned something today.
Did you not know that?
I did not.
Yeah. Wombats, they have like square poos. It's like, is it pandas that poo in a kind of like a teardrop thing? It's got like a special sack around it.
Oh, I don't know. This is news to me.
I watched some footage once. There was a panda enclosure, and there was one panda who was very naughty and kept pooing on all the other pandas' heads while they were asleep.
Oh, man.
But I've moved on from that kind of entertainment.
No, you haven't. Neither have I.
Have you been talking shit about me? Have you been chatting shit?
I have a podcast, Danny. That's all we do.
Yeah, bro.
Gotta get swole, bro. Anyways.
Good boy, Theo. Okay, yes. Okay.